Yes, many thanks for staying with us. So now we're about to get into the conversation. The Port Harcourt Refinery is set to produce, is set to produce crude oil and transform them into crude products, mainly petroleum, and then that we solely, know, and that Nigerians tend to use, and all of that. So looking at this now, the old refinery, which was commissioned in the year 1965, can generate or produce 60,000 barrels per day, and then the new refinery, which has been revamped, also can be able to produce about 150,000 barrels per day. So there's a combination of 210,000 barrels per day, which is what is expected to come from the Port Harcourt Refinery. Now, what is the implication of this reactivation? How can it benefit Nigerians? And what is the dividends, the work that has gone through in the background? Because we know the trajectory of, donkeys of years where we've not seen this refinery coming to light. So a whole lot of resources have been pumped into it. So what role can maintenance and then sustainability play in terms of making sure that it doesn't go back to where it was coming from? And again, what can be done for other refineries in Nigeria to be able to, get back on its feet, just like the current Port Harcourt refinery, which has been reactivated? So what can be done for all of these other refineries to come back to play? So we are going to be saying they're looking at the implications of the reactivation, how it's going to benefit the general public, and also how it's going to, if there is a chance, it's going to help in curbing the current price of the petroleum product. And hopefully we shouldn't be experiencing any form of fuel scarcity with our refinery being, active. Now we have the Dangote refinery, we have the Port Harcourt refinery, and hopefully the one in Kaduna and Warri respectively will get back on its feet and then start working out. It's about time for me to introduce my guest who is joining me virtually, Dr. Wisdom Enang, who is a public affairs analyst. Good morning, Dr. Wisdom. Thank you for joining on to this edition of the program.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much for having me today.
It's been a whole lot of issues, trajectory back and forth. Finally, the Port Harcourt refinery is here and Nigerians are excited. So what's your reaction to the refinery coming back to life after, years of being stagnated?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's a good thing, and very importantly for the South region and then Nigeria at large. And the reason is this. The first is it's a good step in the right direction when we're talking about industrialization of the nation, because there is no way you can talk about industrialization without domesticating energy consumption. And so it is important for us to look at it from that standpoint. Domesticating energy consumption is the first step. And the downstream, the midstream, and the gas sectors are very much responsible for about 70% of the value chain, about 70 to 80% of the petroleum value chain. The upstream, for which we're currently using at the moment, it's only about between 15 to 20% of that value chain. And so what we found is that by being able to industrialize the various aspects of the value chain, like we're doing now with the downstream sector in the Port Harcourt refinery, we're able to create primarily jobs, and of course, we're able to create primary and secondary linkages to the petroleum sector, which is a very important step in Nigeria's industrialization. Now, let's just look at the supply and the pricing as it affects PMS. The supply means that we have more adequate supply. I think there'll be less need for us to do strategic storage within the South region because assuming we're taking inflow from Lagos, then we would have talked about the storage costs, long logistics costs, and all of those fees that the tankers get to pay on their way, both formal and informal, as they approach the South. But with the Port Harcourt refinery, I think a lot of those fees are being cut down, meaning that we can have a situation where some of those outlets in the south can begin to sell fuel almost at the same price with what Lagos is selling. And Lagos is a benchmark case because Lagos is closest to the ports. Either you're looking at the port where the Dangote refinery is, you lift fuel from there, or the port for importation. So it's usually the benchmark case for PMS pricing. So I think it's going to help us make sure that supply is adequate, and it's also going to help us in checking the pricing in the short to medium term. But all of those we contingent on how we strategize, because I see some headlines saying that the Port Harcourt Refinery is already selling to Dubai-based companies, and I worry because if we haven't satisfied our energy demand in the south, then we're already talking about exporting for such a small refinery. It worries me as to what the exact policy body language is. Are we looking at export orientation, or are we looking at domestic development of our refineries and domestic supply of energy to users?
Obviously, we're expected to see that all of this is going to be done domestically, where we'd be able to distribute energy domestically first before looking at exportation and all. But what's avenue in terms of investment? Now, do you think this opens more room for foreign investment? Because we all know that Nigeria is depending solely on oil. So do you think this Port Harcourt refinery coming back to life is an avenue to get more FX investment into the country?
Well, I think definitely it's a litmus test for our policies. The reason is this: the Port Harcourt refinery may or may not be able to get investments on its own. I don't know the business case and what the current owners are planning. However, I think what I do know is that at the moment, we have deregulated the sector. It's now, for the most part, being set by the suppliers. It's not exactly market driven, because for you to have a market driven economy, you've got to have the right level of competition, both from the demand and the supply end. So demand competition would be, we've got different sorts of energy options, we've got other alternative forms of energy, and people can choose based on those energy forms that satisfy the tenets of energy as it applies to the individual. So accessibility, affordability, and availability. However, in the supply side of things, we need to have enough refineries playing on different scale of operations and rejigging some of their refining operations to be able to give us the right pricing. So that would have been a market-driven section. But now, what we're doing is more like is the pricing is being set by the manufacturers or the refiners, in this case, Dangote Refinery. So the survival of the NNPCL's Port Harcourt Refinery will be a litmus test to see does Nigeria's policy now work for the domestic refineries? Are they able to provide a bankable business for investors? And so if it survives, then the investors have better data points like the Dangote Refinery, the Waltersmith, as well as the Port Harcourt Refinery, and then other NNPCL's refinery, to show that truly Nigeria's policy is not just working for one party and not the other, that in fact is creating the right investable ambience for people to come in and maximize outcome from their investments.
About maximizing aspects now, let's look at these other refineries in Kaduna and Warri respectively. For years now, still money has gone into those refineries, and then still we await the response or for those refineries to come back to life. So how swift do you think we could see those refineries getting back on their feet and doing what it's used to do? Looking at this current Port Harcourt refinery, which is said to be able to produce around 210,000 barrels per day. So if we have these other two refineries coming back to life, how swift do you think is going to help aid availability of these products?
I think we should be looking at 24 months, but it depends on what is coming up Is it coming up as a blending plant? Is it coming up as a refinery? What I mean, there have been talks about privatization. Is that going to be privatization that you sell that refinery to a new set of users? And what is going to be their plan? Are they going to be focused on the export market or the domestic market? I mean, a number of things to determine, but in terms of a timeline, we're looking at about 24 months is what I think. We should have reasonable traction to get us to a point of about 70 to 80% completion of those other refineries, and then we can talk about monetization. But I think it's going to play a similar role in the domestic market if we use it like the Port Harcourt Refinery. It's going to help with supply within the regional areas, and of course, will help with price modulations by extension within the regional areas as well.
Time is actually not being our friend at this hour, but let's just get this straight. You know, a lot of Nigerians have argued that the oil sector can be run with or without subsidy. So what's your take? Do you think the oil sector, talking about it being fully privatized now, some Nigerians have argued for it to be fully privatized, but you know that conversation is still lingering because we've not gotten full answers yet. But do you think the sector can be run on a subsidized level?
I mean, I think if we can afford to subsidize, that would have not been a problem, because subsidies are not a problem by itself. It was the way the subsidies were run. I think there was a lot of subsidy scams that we experienced in country, a lot of falsified slips that were put through. But the truth is, Nigeria wouldn't be able to afford that. So I think what we should be doing isn't subsidizing consumption. It should be subsidizing production so that we can expand our productivity and get us that industrial base. Because look at it. Let's just give ourselves context. South Korea doesn't have a drop of oil, but they take mostly Nigeria's oil, refine it, and they have a huge value chain. And today they're one of the they're one of the world's largest refining countries, and they do so on the backdrop of people's oil. So you can imagine the abundant wealth of opportunities across the industrial value chain that subsists within the downstream sectors, like I said, the gas sectors and the midstream sectors. All of those come together to give 80%. And since Nigeria is at a point where we're militating, I mean, we're fighting against several factors. We had a lot of inertia because of the lack of political will to do things when we ought to have done them. Now, a lot of the funding opportunities for projects are going to decarbonization projects. So we're not that lucky to have funders that are coming in for energy projects anymore, especially if it's crude projects or ones that are petroleum energy. And of course, Nigeria is also losing faith in the sights of people. So people are losing faith in the sight of Nigeria, really. So I think ultimately, what we'll get to see is that we will need to sort of bootstrap our way through. Perhaps subsidies may not be the right way because we just can't afford it at the moment. But had we done things a little bit earlier and better when the oil boom was there, left the rent-seeking idea and mentality, perhaps, yes, we would have been in a surplus position to be able to apply certain consumption subsidies. But subsidy isn't bad, but if you can afford it, fine, but I don't think Nigeria can afford it at the moment.
Wisdom, Enang, for joining us on today's edition of Business Points. We really appreciate all of your input on the subject matter.
Thank you, and God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
You too.